ימלוך לעולם ועד. השם מלך, השם מלך, השם ימלוך לעולם ועד. השם מלך, השם מלך, השם ימלוך לעולם ועד. השם מלך, השם מלך, השם ימלוך לעולם ועד. Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, coming to you live from Kingsland, Texas, USA. If you want to talk Tanakh, now's not the time for a walk. You're going to want to grab a cup of coffee, some pencils, and a lot of pencils, because we're going to burn up that lead tonight. We got a brand new broadcast coming to you now. Rabbi Michael Skobac from JewsForJudaism.ca. That's right, he is in Canada, and there is no snow, and I repeat, there is no snow. He wants a refund. New episode for you starting tonight. We'll be here every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central. I don't know what time that is for Rabbi Skobac. That starts with a C too, but that would be CA instead of CE. Never mind, scratch that. Okay. Anyway, new episode altogether, strolling through the New Testament, and now I present to you Rabbi Michael Skobac.
How you doing there? It's great to be here with you,
Rabbi. It's been one of those long hunts for me. I've been listening to your stuff for a long time, and I'm trying to think, should I stalk this guy or should we just see if we ever meet? Oh my goodness. What a blessing. What a blessing, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
It's really sweet to be here with you, and your crew sounds like they're a bunch of great guys as well.
They are. They really are.
Thank
right?
you.
I can count on that, right? Oh, man. Okay. See, this is where I need the other webcam so I can at least go like this and say, here's the crew. Okay. They're not as silent, and I've encouraged them to laugh and talk throughout the broadcast, so that way if they got something to say, they can feed us also. We do have, for all you viewers out there, our 855-952 Bible number is open, and you can press, I believe it's number 3. Is that what I set it up as? Yeah. Press number 3 for strolling through the New Testament with Rabbi Michael Skobac. All right. Well, Michael, before we get going, give us a quick minute or two on your background, and also, if you don't mind, for not just for my benefit, but for the viewers also, tell us a little bit about your website and about what occupies most of your time these days.
Boy, that's hard to squeeze into a soundbite, but I'll try. I grew up in New York. Some people will probably be able to tell from my accent, and I basically was alienated from Judaism kind of teenager. I was basically a hippie back in the 60s and early 70s. I was someone who was really focused and obsessed with world peace, and I thought religions divided people and caused strife in the world, and I thought religions were really the enemy. And I basically was in university when some Jewish students challenged me and said, you know, for someone who hates Judaism so much, they said, wouldn't it make sense to first find out what it's about before you really reject it forever? I really knew nothing about Judaism, and so I took the challenge up. I left university, and I went to a special school in New York for wayward Jews, and I spent 8 years there, ended up becoming a rabbi, and decided that, on the contrary, religions were not evil, and I really saw Judaism as really a movement that has been going on for thousands of years by people who've dedicated themselves to really changing the world for the better. And as an idealist, that's really what I want to live my life to do. So I've been interested in teaching Judaism for a long, long time, since I went to school really there in the early 70s. And I didn't get involved with dealing with other religions until a bit later on, when I was really headhunted by the Jewish community of Philadelphia to run a program to deal with all the evangelical Christian groups that were trying to convert Jews. So since 1983, I've been working with groups like Jews for Judaism to really help the Jewish community stay Jewish. And the work involves not just the threat from evangelical Christian missionaries, but really the fact is that Jews who are not connected to their spiritual core of what it means to be a Jew, they end up becoming Buddhists or Hindus or Baha'is or Jains or Sikhs, or just becoming Jews for nothing. They assimilate. And so we very purposely didn't name our organization Jews Against Anything. We're Jews for Judaism, And we believe that if Jewish people were able to get in touch with the beauty and the power and the incredible depth and spirituality of what they have in their own tradition and faith, they would be captured by it like I was.
Sure.
So that's really what we do. Our website is basically a place where we house a lot of our videos and articles. It's JewsForJudaism.ca, CA for Canada. Everyone says the letter A up here all the time. They say that you spell Canada C-A and A-D-A. And, and that's basically the long and short of it.
Okay, we've already got a caller, but I don't want to go ahead and answer. Oh, yeah, okay. We're gonna play caller roulette. If it's not them, just shoot. No, I'm just kidding. See if it's we've got the whole call log thing set up well, but sometimes it's weird. It comes in from a different phone number. We're not sure if that's the Ring Central that's calling the 855 number, or if it's a bill collector. In which case, we don't want to talk to nobody. So, okay, he's checking the call right now. Okay, so how long of all this time, say if you were to say in percentage-wise, that's our call, okay, how much of the time that you've spent has been dealing with like evangelist and trying to try to bring, because I know the big goal for most of mainstream Christianity, of course, at least in major sects, is to reach out to the Jewish community. So how much of your time that you've spent over these years has been dedicated to that? Well, what is most commonly known in your field is counter-missionary work.
Well, it really started out as the focus of what we were doing, and it still is the bulk of what we do. Although, you know, the way we do counter-missionary work is really to help Jews understand what Judaism is, and we believe that, you know, simply if Jews understand their own faith, their own Bible, they won't be tempted to go elsewhere. But I spend most of my time teaching and counseling. And one of the things that happened over the years is that we realized that the threat was not just Christian missionaries, it was the thousands of cults that end up sucking the Jewish people in, and different Eastern religions, and secularism, and assimilation. So I really am involved with many, many different challenges to Jewish continuity. But because North America, the ambient religion is Christianity, that's usually the greatest draw for Jews, and it's the only, you know, the truth is that Buddhists are not trying to convert Jews in any great, you know, effort. The Jews are just simply going there on their own, but there are probably 1,000 different Christian missions directed to the Jews. So that it tends to be the bulk of what we do is to address the threat of Christian missionizing.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's been something that I'm becoming more and more familiar with myself. One thing that that I'm not sure that a lot of people know that they're aware of, which is something I was not aware of, was that there was actually a rabbi out there, more than just one, like you and Rabbi Tovia Singer, who actually do counter-missionary work, but they actually know the New Testament, and in a lot of cases more often and more qualified in the New Testament understanding and teachings than the actual pastors who are actually preaching this stuff. And so the first time somebody said, well, you need to listen to Rabbi Michael Skobac or Rabbi Tovia Singer, I was thinking, they don't know no New Testament. Why would I want to listen to them? But in reality, I'm floored. I'm like, I've seen a lot of your videos on YouTube, and y'all go to YouTube, do a search for Michael Skobac and any topic you want, and you're probably going to find it there. And I was very humbled by the area that you guys cover with actually basically really knowing what's written in the New Testament, and that was very that's actually what opened my mind up the first time to actually want to hear what you had to say, because it's not like you know, someone who's never known the New Testament says, "Oh, we hate Jesus." That's not what it's about. I mean, you guys know the New Testament and you see which is why we're here today. We're here today for the sole purpose of reading through the New Testament and going to show to you, not me, mostly Rabbi Skobac here, is going to show you all the way through the New Testament why it is that the New Testament really does not jive with the Old Testament, which we call the Hebrew Scriptures. It's going to be an interesting ride, so you definitely want to pay attention. Go grab your coffee, sit down, and just, you know, tune everything else out and tune us in. So, Rabbi, I don't know about you, but I'm anxious. I'm about ready to start reading.
Well, I wanted to before we start reading, just say, I think it's important for me to say this, that I think that I really have to proceed with this project we have with a certain amount of respect and humility.
Yes, indeed.
Because this is not my Bible. These are not my scriptures. And these are scriptures that are holy and revered by other people. And I have to, I think, be careful and respectful and, really, not assume things that I shouldn't be assuming.
Sure.
Because I'm an outsider. I'm really an outsider looking into someone else's scriptures. But on the other hand, the Christian scriptures do invite my response because, especially Matthew, they're addressed to me. They're addressed to the Jewish people. They make claims vis-a-vis the Jewish people. So I feel that on the one hand, I have to be respectful and read with humility. On the other hand, I think that there is a place for Jewish people and including rabbis to weigh in on the claims and the writings of the Christian scriptures, because they do address in many ways the Jewish people. In many ways, they're a polemic directed towards the Jewish people. So I think that's why I feel the door has been opened for us to maybe make this examination.
And Rabbi, to further agree with you on that, my original vision for this thing was to not only point out the errors of the New Testament, but also to give it praise where it's worthy, because there's a lot of places in the New Testament that it actually does teach obedience to Torah. I think there's just a lot of confusion sewn into the understanding of how the New Testament was canonized and who wrote what, and nobody even knows really who wrote what, except for mainly Paul's writings. But I know in a lot of Paul's writings, I do know that I have seen where not just there, but really all through the New Testament, I found over 100 New Testament references that I've slowly searched out myself, not taken someone else's list, and literally documented over 100 times where it talks about obedience to Torah. Now, granted, it also seems to be like countering that by saying, "Oh, you don't need that," but they're in there, and I think that those places that when they are present, I want to give homes to that. So, let them have credit where credit is definitely due, and like you said, really approach this thing with a super high level of respect for the people because there's so many people like myself who was following the New Testament. I didn't know it was wrong. I didn't know what I was doing was wrong. I didn't know there was anything idolatrous behind it. I was simply trying to connect with God, and I know that that's your heart, is to reach people who have that same understanding and to respect them in their journey that they're taking now.
100%.
Amen. All right. Well, Rabbi, are you about ready to roll?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I just would like to throw in one more preamble.
Yes, sir. I used to know the preamble to the Constitution, by the way. I had to learn that when I was like in preschool. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. Go ahead.
They would always tell this famous story where the person would get up to speak and say, "Before I speak, I want to say a few words."
And then I'm going to tell you what I said.
I don't really want to spend a lot of time on this because this could really become a huge discussion. But okay. I think just it's important, I believe, as a foundation that a Christian Bible. If you pick up a Christian scriptures. That's what they call the whole Bible, not just the little small New Testament. But the Christian Bible basically places Matthew right after Malachi, what Christians sometimes call Malachi. And it's an incredible, from a Jewish perspective, an incredible optical illusion that was created. Because what happened basically was that the Greek scriptures, the Greek Testament, was glued onto the back of the Tanakh and the back of the Jewish scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures, and the Christians call it the Bible. This is the Holy Bible. And it gave the Greek scriptures, the New Testament, almost automatic credibility because it's seen as one book. And so we are going to be studying together, God willing, the Christian scriptures, the Greek Testament. But I think it's important just to throw out this question. I'm not going to really fully answer it tonight, and I think we'll really be answering it as we go through in the coming weeks. But why is it that Judaism does not accept the Christian Bible? Meaning, why don't we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Romans, and Acts, etc., as part of our scriptures? What is the problem that Judaism has with these books? And I think that again, Christians often don't appreciate the incredible power of this image, just the visual image of seeing these books all together in one book they call the Holy Bible.
Sure.
Many people don't know that Mormons have what they call a triple Bible. I have one in my office. It's huge because it's the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, and then it's followed by the New Testament, and then it has the Book of Mormon and Doctrines and Covenants and Pearl of Great Price. But the Mormons basically took the entire Christian Bible, which includes the Hebrew Scriptures, and they glued the Book of Mormon onto the back of that.
Sure.
That becomes their Bible. And so the question really to ask is that for something to be in the Bible, for a person to want to have their writings canonized as part of the Bible, really it's a claim to having received a revelation from God.
Right.
We don't put things in the Bible just because there's some private document that was written. The person who is canonized, the biblical canon, is significant. It's important because it's supposed to be communication to us from God. And this becomes an incredibly important question, meaning that we begin as Jews with the foundational question of how do we know that Moses was a prophet? How do we know that God spoke to Moses? And the important thing to remember about Moses is that he wasn't just a person who came to us and told us that God spoke to him. We see in Exodus chapter 19, verse 9, that God spoke to Moses, but every Jew at Mount Sinai, every person who would come out of Egypt, heard God speaking to Moses. There were 3 million people who heard God speaking. So it's not simply that Moses convinced everyone that God spoke to him. It was so clear that God established the credibility of Moses really by making every single person there a prophet. Every person heard from God. And that's why the foundation of Judaism is always resting on the 5 books of Moses. There are no new laws that appear in the books of the prophets. The books of the prophets were there basically to encourage the Jewish people to follow the laws of Moses. But the laws that God gave us are only in the 5 books of Moses. And the $64,000 question then becomes, fine, we understand why Moses is accepted as a prophet, but what about Samuel? What about Jeremiah? What about Isaiah? What about Nahum? How do we know that God really spoke to Isaiah?
Right.
And it's a question many people don't bother asking. When a Christian picks up their Bible, they often assume axiomatically that these are men of God who heard from God, but it's an important question to ask. How do we know? And we as Jews would ask that question about people like Matthew. How do we know as Jews that God really spoke to Matthew and these words reflect a revelation from God? So I want to just leave that at this point as a question. I'm not going to answer it. But I think that from a Christian perspective, they could appreciate the question because they have to really take the same exercise when it comes to the Book of Mormon. How do they know that Joseph Smith was not really speaking in the name of God? And there are many Christian books that are written to explain why they don't accept the Book of Mormon as divinely revealed. So they have to go through this exercise as well. And so maybe in the course of the coming weeks, it'll become clearer to us why, from a Jewish perspective, we don't accept these books in the Greek Testament as divinely revealed.
Okay.
So that's my little preamble, and now we can just rock and roll into the Christian Bible.
One more thing I want you to do, if you don't mind.
Yes.
What do you say to the person who says this? I'm going to be the person. No, I'm not, because I can't really. It would be better if I gave you an example of how would you answer it. Okay, what do you say to the person who not only doesn't really care whether the New Testament contradicts the Old Testament or not? They've only know what they've been taught in the New, so they really give supreme authority to the New Testament. But what do you say to the person who doesn't understand the importance of knowing that you can't have a New Testament without the Old Testament? You probably couldn't
Well,
convince
I've never
them.
met such a person in my entire life.
Really?
I mean,
You know what?
the only
Texas is full of them.
I gotta come to Texas more often.
I say that respectably, but I've talked to so many people, and I can't say all Texas because a lot of it I've seen on Facebook is like, I'll go through a dialogue with prophecy and how it contradicts. They basically say, I don't care. I had a vision, or it's not important to me. Why? Their understanding is, why do I need to make sure everything I'm seeing now, when I actually heard a voice from heaven? Who cares what the Old Testament says? Who cares if it says it's different? Well, God has
I would tell them to go speak to their pastor.
Oh, good. Well, you know what? That's a very good point. That's a very good point, because I doubt the pastor would argue with you.
There was a heresy. It was considered a heresy by the church in the early days of Christianity. Someone named Marcion.
Right.
And Marcion was someone who, he basically felt the Old Testament really wasn't worth the paper it was written on, and but the church never accepted that. And for the church, I think they really couldn't get away from the Hebrew Scriptures. The foundation was so incredibly solid. It's so interesting, by the way, that the two competing religions with Judaism, what they often call the daughter religions, Christianity and Islam, they both accept the revelation at Mount Sinai, because the foundation of its credibility is so strong and solid that they really couldn't. It would have been so much easier to say, look, the Jews are under some delusion. They never really heard from God, and we now have our new religion that we're getting from our own prophets and our own people of God. But I think it says a lot about the credibility of the Hebrew Scriptures, that both Islam and Christianity basically accept their foundation, but they come along and they say, to be continued, but wait, there's
Sure.
more. And that's really the claim that both Christianity and Islam make, is that Judaism went so far, but then there was more added later on. And that's exactly the question I was raising now, is by what standard do we evaluate those claims, both of Christianity and Islam, that there was further revelation after the canon of the Old Testament was concluded? But in all of my years, I've never met Christians who would tell me they don't really care what it says in the Hebrew Scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
It's true that many Christians don't pay a lot of attention to it, that many churches don't focus their sermons or their teachings on the Hebrew Scriptures, and it's one of the reasons why there's sort of a revival in the church to take the Old Testament more seriously. All this tremendous interest in the church now in the foundations of their faith. I think there was a recognition that they was sort of not really taking the Hebrew Scriptures, which is part of their Bible, as really seriously as they should. So I really haven't had that question in all of my years thrown at me.
Wow. So
Yeah.
this is the first time for everything.
Okay.
And it came from a guy who is no longer there. So. All right. Okay, Rabbi. Well, what do you think? Should we start this truck up and get her moving?
Let's rock and roll.
All right. You want to start off reading, or do you want me to give you some windbreak?
Why don't you take a shot at the first verse?
Oh, sure. Give me the genealogy. Hey, that's good, though. You can just go, or yay.
We're not going to go too far, by the way.
Okay, yeah, and just to let the viewers know, again, the call-in number is 855-95-BIBLE. That translates to 855-952-4253. And you can call this number, but only if you have questions related to Matthew, or comments related to Matthew chapter 1, because that's probably all we're going to cover. We may not even make it to the end of it, but I do know that Rabbi has at least 6 good points he's going to bring to you today. not including anything that I might be able to pull off. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So just sit tight. We're gonna have a good time. Call in if we hear the phone ringing. We'll just hang on. You'll automatically be put on hold at a certain point once you speak. Travis, they talk to you first, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll actually you'll hear a voice greeting first, and you'll press. It'll tell you press 1, 2, or 3. You'll press 3 for today's show for Rabbi Skobac, and then Travis will answer, get your name, or maybe not. Depends on
He'll
whether
he'll screen out the bill collectors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if your first name, has anything to do with Bell South or TEC. That you might actually be on an eternal hold. So, but do call in. But again, Matthew chapter 1, that's the topic for the day. And so if you have questions on Matthew chapter 2, wait until next week to call in. Not being rude, just want to make sure we don't have any topic. We are going to try to shut down. Oh my goodness, we're gonna have to go quick. It's 8:28 already. Okay, this first broadcast might go as long as Rabbi Michael Skobac will allow it to go. We already have a call?
Well, we do, but tell them to call back.
Okay, if you were listening to this, why you want them to call back?
Well, because I don't think they're.
Oh, what did they already? They're already not on the phone now. Okay. If you just called, call back, please. You get an actual live video greeting from William. Is that it? Go ahead. Okay, that caller just called back, so we might actually get them first before we take off reading, depending on who that is. So. Again, Matthew chapter 1, Rabbi Michael Skobac, love you, love your work, JewsForJudaism.ca. So you want to check that out, and also YouTube, so go there. All right, Matthew chapter 1, and I will stop as soon as that call comes in. So if you're watching, I'm not going to get long-winded here, but we're just going to get the ball rolling anyway. Okay, the book of the generation of J.C., the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac begot Jacob. Jacob begot Judas and his brethren. And Judas begot Phares and Zerah of, is that Thamar? Or I thought it was Tamar.
Tamar, yeah.
Tamar, Th. They must have be Ashkenazic with the Tav. Isn't that how they work with the Tav? Some say T and some say Th. I don't know how that works. And Phares beget Esrom, and Esrom beget Aram. Have we got any, are we still okay so far? Or is there, I know there's a genealogical problem here. I just don't know where it's at exactly.
A problem?
Okay, you got it? Okay, hold that thought in the back of your head, and we're going to take a call. Caller, welcome to Kingsland, Texas, to Knock Talk. Who do we have on the phone?
This is Tristan Johnson. I'm a big fan. I just probably messaged you. You sent me a comment, but
Tristan Johnson. Where are you calling from?
Yes, sir. From North Carolina.
From North Carolina. Rabbi, can you hear him okay? Because it's kind of quiet on my end.
Straining to hear him.
Can you give the caller a little bit more volume? Okay, very good. Okay, Tristan, go ahead and continue. Go ahead and keep talking. We're going to try to turn you up just a little bit here.
All right.
Oh, that's perfect.
Of Jesus.
Very good.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I talked right over the top of you because we were testing the sound. Now, if you don't mind, I'll be quiet and I'll let you give the you do the talking.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The genealogy of Jesus, and it says I had a conversation with somebody, and the prophecy, and I said that Jesus didn't have a father of Joseph, and Joseph was the only one who was related to Abraham, and he said back then that him taking care of Jesus would have been recognized as him being the father. Is that true?
Rabbi, it's all you.
Well, this is often, a response that Christian apologists offer for one of the major problems in Matthew chapter 1. Basically, you have two chapters in the Gospels that try to establish the genealogical record of Jesus going all the way back to King David. We know from the Hebrew Scriptures that one of the prerequisites of the Messiah, of being the Messiah, is they have to be a descendant of King David. It's one of the things that the Hebrew Scriptures say most often about the Messiah. They refer to him as a descendant of David. And so because that's an axiom, a prerequisite, the Christian Scriptures spend two chapters basically trying to establish the credibility or the authenticity of Jesus' genealogy. And so here you have in Matthew chapter 1, as William just read, This is the book of the genealogy. It really should have said the chapter, because it's not a whole book of genealogy. I just noticed that for the first time. So it's really a chapter focusing on the genealogy of Jesus, and it does trace him back to King David. The problem is that when you read the chapter, it really only traces Joseph, who is the husband of Mary. It traces Joseph back to King David, but then we know that in the middle of the chapter it tells us that Joseph was not really the father of Jesus, and Jesus was really born from the Holy Spirit impregnating Mary. So the question is, how does Jesus then trace himself back to King David if Joseph is not his father? There's an interruption in the genealogical record. So one of the responses that's given very frequently, most often by Christian apologists, is that Joseph may not have been the biological father of Jesus, but he would have been the legal father through adoption, meaning because Joseph ostensibly, who ended up marrying Mary and ostensibly raising Jesus, at least for a while, he became the legal father, and the presumption is that he adopted Jesus. So that's often offered as a way of justifying how Jesus is able to trace himself back to King David through his adoptive father, Joseph. That's not so simple, because basically in the scriptures there's no evidence really that a person is able to pass on their genealogy through adoption. For example, in the Bible, we know that one of the most important offices is the office of the priest. And a priest was someone who was born to a father who was a priest. That's basically the only way you can become a priest. You're a priest if your father was a priest. And for example, if a person was not born to a priest, but was adopted by a priest, there's no evidence that this child who's adopted then becomes a priest through adoption. So there are actually many other problems with this adoption scenario, but yes, it is something that's been advanced or offered to help patch up the broken telephone here, the broken line that really would separate Jesus from King David, again because of this problem of the virgin birth, which we'll hopefully, God willing, get into a little bit later tonight.
Okay, very good. That's awesome. Tristan, did that answer your question?
Yes, sir, and I really appreciate it.
Hey, man, I really appreciate you keeping in touch with us on Facebook. Be sure to tell your friends, anytime we have these shows coming up, share them on your wall, because there might be people who are in your friends list who may be curious about this stuff as well. So, again, thank you for calling.
Yes, sir. If only there was more Jews in North Carolina where I'm at, because my synagogue only got 4 people in it.
Wow.
Crazy.
I'm going to send some down there to you. They want some nice warm weather here from Canada. We'll send them down to you.
Hey,
a whole truckload.
All right. Thanks for calling,
Thank you,
Tristan.
sir. I really appreciate it.
Hey, man, it's all for you guys. This is great. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Rabbi, it's been like 84 degrees here lately. I mean, this last week.
Don't rub it in, please. Today I woke up, it was minus 14 this morning.
And no snow. Now, see, that's what I would call the complaint department, because if it's going to be cold, at least put some white out there on the ground.
Yeah, we have a sprinkling, but we don't call that snow.
Oh, gotcha. You know, it's really funny here in Texas. I don't mean to get so far off course, but in Texas, it's like they don't know what rain is, so when it rains, it's like as soon as it starts to sprinkle, it seems like they shut down the schools. I'm thinking, God, it's really not going to flood, I promise you, man. All right. Very good. Very good.
So I wanted to raise a problem here.
Okay.
Because, the verse that you began with,
yes, sir,
which speaks of the genealogy of Jesus, again, this is a chapter that this is the central theme, is trying to trace the genealogy, the pedigree of Jesus, if you will. And one of the themes that is really raised almost universally by Christian theologians and apologists and teachers is walking with Matthew chapter 1 in their hand. They say, we have here evidence, or at least we have documentation of Jesus's genealogy going all the way back to King David. And often a challenge that's thrown at the Jewish community is that if Jesus wasn't the Messiah, they say it will be impossible to ever have a Messiah in the future after him, because they maintain that all of the genealogical records that the Jewish people had that were housed in the temple in Jerusalem were destroyed when the temple was burnt to the ground by the Romans in the year 70. And so they say that after the destruction of the temple, there really is no way for anyone to be able to trace themselves back to King David, and therefore they say that it's impossible really to have anyone to step into the shoes of a messianic candidate because they don't have access to these genealogical records. This is a claim that you see really raised all the time, and I needed to just spend a few moments on it because I think it's very relevant to this chapter. If that's okay.
Yes, Rabbi. Before, let me do this. Tell for the Christian who just tuned in, explain to them why it's important to understand the genealogy. Because, and again, I'm speaking from my own ignorance in the past. I didn't know that it was even important to know. I mean, I thought it was just there just for the, just in case somebody wanted to know where I come from. Hey, this is my mom. We used to eat tacos on, whatever. I didn't realize how important it was. But this is actually here for a specific purpose. This isn't here just to give the reader information about who we came from. But this is here for a divine purpose, if you will. How do you express that to the viewer who doesn't understand that? I mean,
well, the reason it's so important for the Gospels to spend so much time tracing Jesus' genealogy is because in the Hebrew Scriptures, this is a absolute requirement of the Messiah. One of the things that we know most clearly of anything we know about the Messiah is that he has to be a descendant of King David. We know, for example, that several times in the Hebrew Scriptures, David was promised that there would always be a descendant of his who would be able to sit upon the throne and be the king of the Jewish people, and God promised that that would be eternal, that there would always be a descendant of David who would be able to sit on the throne of the Jewish people, and it could only be a descendant of David. And all of the references to the Messiah, the clear references in the Hebrew Bible to the Messiah, always speak about him as a descendant of David. So you'll find in the 11th chapter of Isaiah, it speaks about this descendant of Jesse, Yishai, who was the father of David. And then you find it in Jeremiah chapter 23, and Jeremiah chapter 30, and Jeremiah chapter 33, and Ezekiel chapter 34, and Ezekiel chapter 37. All of these are the major passages in the Bible about the Messiah, and they all speak about him as being a descendant of David. And so because that's so absolutely necessary, the Christian Bible couldn't avoid having to deal with it, and that's why they spend so much time and so much ink tracing the genealogy of Jesus. And so they're sensitive to this, and because they feel they have this very clear record of Jesus' genealogy, they then use it as a weapon by turning the tables on the Jewish people and saying, look, we have a genealogical record for Jesus, but you, who don't believe he's the Messiah, you don't have any genealogical records. You don't have any way of proving that someone is a descendant of King David, and therefore you can't have a Messiah. It's a very common claim, and it's a serious claim that they're making, and I think that I just want to clarify that it's really an urban myth. It's more of a biblical urban legend than anything else. There really is no basis, in fact, to this claim that all of the records of the Jewish people, their family records, were all kept in the temple that was destroyed in the year 70. There are only two references in the Bible, two places where the Bible does speak about genealogical records. You'll find it in the book of Ezra, chapter 2, and you'll find it in the book of Nehemiah, what Christians often call Nehemiah, chapter 7. So those two books, which speak about the return of the Jewish people, or some of the Jewish people, to the land of Israel after they were in the Babylonian exile. So we're told that Ezra did make an accounting of the people who came back from Babylon to Israel. Tragically, it was actually a very, very small number. We're told only about 42,000 plus, I think it was 42,360 people came back to Israel from Babylon. So there was a record kept of who came back, and you find a similar record that's reproduced in the 7th chapter of the book of Nehemiah. That's the only reference really you have in the Bible to genealogical records. What you see in both of these books, though, is that the purpose of documenting people's genealogy was primarily to make sure we knew who the priests were. So you'll see, for example, in Ezra chapter 2, verses 61 and 62, that they weren't able to clarify that certain people were priests. And you see the same thing in the book of Nehemiah, chapter 7, verse 64, where the genealogy is only really something that's used for the purpose of clarifying whether someone was part of the priestly family. But beyond that, I really wanted to tackle this, if I could, step by step with you and with the audience. When it speaks about these records in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, it doesn't say that they're kept in the temple. There's no mention at all that they were records that were kept in the temple. They obviously could have been kept anywhere in Jerusalem. Number two, and I mentioned this a few moments ago, these lists were only of the Jews who had come back from Babylon to live in Israel. And so there were no genealogical records kept of the majority of Jews who remained in Babylon. And so there's no idea that there was a complete record of all the Jewish people and genealogies anywhere. And certainly there's no mention of it being kept in the temple. Another thing to point out is that when you read the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, all it tells us is that there were records that were kept at the time they came back, but there's absolutely no mention or evidence that this list was continually updated for the hundreds of years that would have lasted until the 1st century. It's interesting, though, that if you get your hands on the life of Josephus, he wrote, I guess, an autobiography it's called The Life of Josephus. He wrote it about a generation after the temple was destroyed. He writes it at the end of the 1st century. And there he writes at the very, very beginning of his own story that he was able to verify his family genealogy through the records that he saw. So here we see that a generation after the temple was destroyed, people still had access to genealogical records.
Right.
It's interesting, by the way, also that in Josephus he wrote a very famous defense of Judaism called Keneged Apion, or Against Apion. And in the beginning of this work, I think the 7th chapter, he also mentions that the primary purpose of these genealogical records was for the purpose of clarifying who was a priest and who wasn't a priest. I believe, by the way, that Josephus was a priest. Now, let me just go one step further with this. From a biblical Jewish perspective, how does a person know their genealogy? Now, there were certain cases where it was actually important to know your genealogy. One would have been the case of a priest, if you were a priest. And how would you know that you were a priest? Very simple. Your parents would tell you, you know what, kid? You're a priest. That's a big deal. You have a very important function to play. You serve in the Holy Temple. So people didn't have to go to any kind of central records to find out whether they were a priest or not. If they were a priest, it was a big deal. People were proud of being a priest. And any priestly family would tell their children, you guys are priests. The same thing would be with people that came from the royal family. Anyone that was born to the family of David you can bet that they would have been told early on in life, you know what, kid? You come from the line of David. And that's a big deal because
Absolutely.
one day you could be the Messiah.
That's funny.
You could be the Messiah.
Yeah.
So basically, genealogy was passed down through parental testimony. You knew who you were because your parents told you. However, there were always people, like we see in the case of Josephus, there were people who always maintained their own private family records. There are people today, and I've met some of them, who have what are called Sifrei Yuchsin, books of genealogy. I'll tell you something that blew my mind when I first saw it. I have a neighbor here. I had a Shabbat dinner at their house once, and they showed me their family tree going all the way back, ready for this?
Go for it.
To Adam and Eve.
Wow.
I was shaking, holding it in my hands.
Wow.
They're able to trace themselves all the way back. Now, it's not as hard as you think, because if they can get themselves back even to someone like King David, then you just can use the Bible and find out how to get it back to Adam and Eve.
Right.
But there are people today, many, many people today, who have written genealogical records of their family that can trace themselves back to King David. Now, you could say, well, maybe these people fabricated these lists. Maybe someone just wrote down a bunch of names and came up with a list that traces themselves back to King David. That's true. But you know what? Matthew could have done the same thing.
Sure.
When you read Matthew's genealogy, some of it you can check by comparing it to the Hebrew Bible. You have in the first book of Chronicles, chapter 3, you have many of the names that you find in the genealogy in Matthew chapter 1, but then it runs out at a certain point, and there's no way of really verifying, for example, if this list really is an authentic list going back from Joseph, the husband of Mary, all the way back to King David, meaning that the missing generations also could have been fabricated. Right. Which leads us to my final question. How do we really know for sure then? Meaning that if the Messiah was to show up today, and he came with his own family record showing that he traces himself back to King David, a skeptic could say, well, how do I know these documents are credible? Maybe you just made up the list yourself. So there is maybe one way in which this can be solved. That one of the things that the Hebrew Scriptures tell us is that before the coming of that great and awesome day of the Lord, which is always a code word for the messianic age, right, we're told that the prophet Elijah would return. That's at the very end of the book of Malachi, very last few verses of the prophets. We're told that Elijah the prophet will return. He himself, he never died. We know he went up to heaven, and he's always hanging out, but we're told that he will come back before the coming of Messiah, and he'll return the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers. And what some people say is that maybe it was important to have a prophet around at the time of the coming of the Messiah, because through his powers of prophecy, he will be able to verify people's genealogy. And it might be one of the reasons why it would be important to have Elijah the prophet available at the time the Messiah comes, because you could always question, you could always be suspicious that maybe the documentation of someone's genealogy is not on the up and up, it's not totally legit. And a prophet would be able to know through his prophetic powers, through his prophecy, whether someone really, in fact, does trace themselves back to King David. But the important point here is that this claim that there were records that were kept of all the Jews in the temple that were destroyed and there's no more records, that's just simply not true. That's not the case.
Okay. Rabbi, we have another question. And first of all, I need to tell everybody, Rabbi, our format that you and I are trying to do, we really need about a 3 or 4 hour segment per show. It's already 8:50. We've got 9 minutes left, and on any other given day, we might be able to stretch it long. But both, Mr. T, I got to call you Mr. T until I get further notice. Mr. T and Pete have got to get going. They got kids to pick up and stuff like that. So soon. So we're gonna have to really hit it tight. I want to go with this question right here by Keith in the chat room. What we probably should do, Rabbi, next week, because I can see that this hour is really going to be a major crunch time. By the way, hey, y'all, check this out. This is going, no special effects. There's your winning number. Number 3, because we're way out of time. So, okay, check your face. Actually, you know what? Hey, Pete, go on there while I'm talking real fast and make sure that number was even picked. I think it was. Okay, instead of reading, Rabbi, like every single verse, probably what we should do is I'll follow you along. You already have some preset things. Like you got 6 points. In fact, before I even read you this question, if you can kind of real quickly in like, a minute and a half, tell us what those 6 points are so they give them something to tease for next week, because we're going to probably have to go back and revisit Matthew chapter 1 next week. Can you do that for us real fast? and then I'll read to you Keith's question and we'll close on his question. How's that?
Well, you know what? I won't even have time to go through the coming attractions.
Okay.
Obviously, one of the things we'll discuss is the virgin birth, and that's a big.
Very good.
But there are some other smaller issues which are though important to discuss, and we'll have to split Matthew chapter 1 into 2 segments.
2? You serious? I'm thinking like 12.
No. We'll finish it next.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, next week we won't have to go through the prepping the whole video and letting everybody know what we're doing. We can just get the kickoff.
We'll fly next week.
We will fly, and I'll talk less. How's that?
I'll talk less too.
Okay, Keith in the chat room says, my question is that some missionaries say that Matthew didn't mean to suggest that the Holy Spirit impregnated Mary in a reproductive manner. They say that Matthew never claims that the child is not born of Joseph's seed. He implies that God somehow translated that seed from. It's funny. I've never heard this before. That's an interesting point, though. It says that God translated that seed somehow from Joseph to Mary's womb through a miraculous power of the Holy Spirit. They cite Psalms 104:30. I'm losing my lines here. You sent forth your spirit, they are created, and in Job 33:4, the Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty gives me life, to support their claims. How would Rabbi Skobac respond to this?
You know what? I would agree with that, because I would say that every single human birth is miraculous. And, it's not simply that a man and a woman get together and that there's a seed that's transferred from a man to a woman. This whole process wouldn't really work if there wasn't the Almighty making sure that every step of the way it was going properly. When you think about it, the human birth, the process is so incredibly complex. There are millions of things that can go wrong. And, when you're talking about the origin of life, if the tiniest thing goes wrong, the whole thing is a disaster. It's like when you shoot a spaceship into outer space, if it's off course by a millionth of a degree, it's going to end up on Pluto instead of Saturn. So I would say that these scriptures are telling us not about one special birth of one person in history, but that the Bible is telling us that every single human being that's born, every birth is miraculous, and that God is there. As a matter of fact, the Talmud tells us that there are 3 partners in the birth of every human being. There's the mother, there's the father, and there's God. And so God is not absent from the birth of any person, and we are only able to breathe the breath that we're taking right this moment because God is giving us each breath. One of the earliest meditations in rabbinic literature is based upon the last verse in the book of Psalms, where it says, Kol haneshama tahalel Yah. Let every soul praise God. And the rabbis say, don't read it as every soul, but Kol haneshima, every breath. The word in Hebrew, soul, neshama, is very closely related to the word for neshima, breath. And so the rabbis say, for every breath we take, we should be thankful to God. So I think that really it's not unique to Jesus that God was part of that birth process.
It's kind of like the Rabbi Singer had mentioned a really interesting point I never thought of before. He said, instead of when somebody asks you, do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, rather than just blurting out no, explain it. I mean, using that same logic, without God, the miracle of life wouldn't be there. Well, yeah, I believe that Jesus is a son of God, but there's where it might be a problem. I mean, I believe I'm a son of God also.
You certainly are.
So with all that said, so they kind of falls in the same category, I believe. So
yeah, we'll have
good.
more time to discuss the virgin birth on next week.
Very good, very good. And by the way, we just confirmed that it is Wendy Banuelos. Wendy, please don't send me no hate mail if I said your name wrong. You can find Wendy very easily, by the way. She has a really wonderful Facebook group. I believe it's called Torah Babies, if I'm not mistaken.
Torah Babies it is.
That's our Wendy. Wendy, congratulations. Yeah. Send me just send me a personal message, private message, and I'll tell you what to do, okay? And so with that said, Rabbi, it is 8:57. Do you have any, I would say, words of encouragement to those who are still skeptical about people like me and you who are trying to lead them, into a path of falling from grace? I mean, and I know that sounds silly, but that's the number one thing that I heard over and over and over again was, you're falling from grace, you're going to be cursed. And what's really interesting is, ever since I left the New Testament altogether and really made it publicly known, it's been just the opposite. Hashem has been there to catch me, and he's been blessing us way more than we've ever been blessed before.
And I think that you really have hit the nail on the head. That the proof is in the pudding.
Absolutely.
And when people say that that there's no salvation outside of the church, and that everything outside of the church is spiritual death, I mean, that's a belief that people have. But you really can't argue with the lives of people who are living godly lives and are walking with God and are blessed by God and have a personal relationship with God that are not part of the church.
Right.
And so, look, people can believe what they want. I would say that, I don't see myself as here to send anybody to hell. I see myself as encouraging people to use the godly faculty they have of studying and thinking, making informed decisions. And, God gave us a sensitivity to truth. One of the things that makes us human is that we are repulsed by that which is false, and we appreciate and we love that which is true. And I would encourage everyone to, be open-minded and, to engage in the process of studying and analysis, and we'll probably be shedding light on things maybe that people that have only studied within the context of a church never thought about in terms of the Greek scriptures, the New Testament. It may be for some people enlightening to hear the perspective of a rabbi who really is part of this 3,000-plus-year-old tradition where the book of Romans says that the Bible was entrusted to the Jewish people.
Right.
God gave us the scriptures to maintain, so maybe we have a perspective on the New Testament that's just worth listening to.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I know I've surely been blessed by it. Rabbi, thank you for joining us, and for all you viewers and callers out there, keep on coming back. It's going to be great. I promise we'll try to cover more next time. We won't have as much up front to cover next time, so we should be able to dive right in, and I'll try to keep my 2 cents in my pocket. Until next time, Lila Tov, tune in, www.tenaktalk.com, and for Rabbi Michael Skobac, that's JewsForJudaism.ca. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom.